Dadabase. I'm Matt. This is my good friend Andy Bell.
Hello.
How you doing today?
All right.
Fantastic. Here on the Dadabase, we're working on collecting stories and experiences from other dads in order to help other dads. And so we're interested in finding out a little bit more about you and your experiences as a dad. Why don't we start off with telling us about your children?
So my kid, I have a 5-year-old Jasper and then 2-year-old Axel. They're both funny, little blonde-haired, blue-eyed little kids. Anyway, they're hilarious. Anytime that, in particular Jasper, he's the older one, he has a sense of humor that's a lot like mine, which means that he can get away with saying inappropriate things because it'll make you laugh. And anytime he does that, my wife punches me in the shoulder. And I get punched in the shoulder quite a bit. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Maybe well deserved, but
It probably is.
So is it?
It's all your fault. Yeah, it really, yeah.
Yep. All right. I'll own it.
Yeah.
Yep. So Axel is likely to fall in the same.
Yes.
In the same pattern?
He definitely, he's devious. He follows along with his brother. They're very different in that, like, Jasper was always a very cautious, even as a small kid. He'd really kind of look around and he didn't want to kind of stretch his boundaries too much physically. In fact, there was one time years ago we were at the beach with a couple other kids who were just a little bit older who loved to wrestle, and they tried wrestling with him, and he didn't want anything to do with it, kind of freaked out, whatever. But Axel is completely the opposite, where he'll kind of look occasionally, but by and large, he jumps, he loves to wrestle, he'll fight you. Both kiddos have little car beds. And in Jasper's room, he also has this giant sort of pseudo beanbag thing in his room. And Jasper's 5, he's fine. He'll jump from the edge of his bed onto the beanbag, no big deal. But Axel will do the exact same thing as well. And not just like subtly where it'll land on his butt, but just full on Superman, land on his face, get up and do it again. And
Fantastic.
It's just a little different in that way, but they're both a lot of personality, a lot of character. In fact, Jasper's preschool teacher, he just graduated preschool this week. Graduated preschool.
Right. Isn't that a thing?
Yeah, apparently it is. Tangent. But one of my friends, he has a kindergartner, and so he posted pictures of their kindergarten graduation, cap and gown and the whole thing. I'm like, cap? I didn't have a cap and gown. It was, okay, all right, whatever.
Yeah, I just went home that day.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But his preschool teacher told me at 2 different periods of time, she's like, I just know that one day I'm going to go, I knew him when. Like, he has so much personality that I fully believe that he's going to be famous or well known for something, because he's just so much. He would sing songs in class and do his dance moves and all kinds of stuff.
Fantastic. So since you've got a 5-year-old and you've got a 2-year-old, what have you seen as a dad about their interactions with each other? Are they combative, contrarian, or do they get along really well?
Right. They get along, for the most part, really well. Jasper is very gentle with Axel, and Axel loves to follow him around. On Thursday night, actually, for the first time, we were going to let them sleep in the same bed together, because Jocelyn doesn't work, my wife, she doesn't work on Fridays, and so the kids can sleep in a little bit later if they want to, although for Axel, sleeping in would mean waking up at 7 instead of 6:30.
I know that life.
Yes. Fortunately, I get up earlier than that, but for other reasons. But anyway, so we had them in their room, story read, night-night, whatever. And Jocelyn and I are downstairs, watching Netflix, whatever. And all of a sudden we hear these little feet and Jasper calls down. He's upstairs, but walking toward the stairs because we're hanging out downstairs. And he's like, I have bad news. Axel's awake, and he's following me. But that's kind of their dynamic where, you know, Axel will follow along. He wants to do what Big Brother's doing, and you can see the admiration there and a love there. And then they'll fight and wrestle from time to time, but they're not necessarily trying to hurt each other, but occasionally they will.
Right.
Sometimes, you know, like any kid, if I have a toy and, you know, the other one comes over and tries to take it or threatens it in any way, there's a little bit of a freak out. But overall, they're really good together.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yes.
So
good for the parents too.
Right. Right. Keep each other busy for me. So what have you found leading up to today has been your biggest challenge of having a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old?
I don't know about biggest challenge so much as I try and keep in mind. I remember seeing I think it was a stand-up comedian once, and it wasn't a stand-up. Anyway, it doesn't matter who it was. Blah blah blah. But yeah, his kind of philosophy was, I want my interactions with both children that I have, so that when I'm with them, they are convinced that they're my favorite.
Oh.
And so I try and keep that in mind as best as I can. Of like, okay, if I'm spending a lot of time with Jasper, you know, doing whatever, that okay, I need to make sure that I'm finding, you know, moments with Axel as well. Now, Axel is totally a mama's boy, and Jasper is much more of a daddy's boy. So it's a little easier to find time or have time with Jasper because he's constantly trying to like play games with me and do things like that.
Yeah.
So it's trying to keep in my head like that balance, you know, and then just the normal of trying to make sure that I'm involved and that it's not all mom. You know, I don't want that 1940s vibe, you know,
right.
where it's, all right, I'm home from work, leave me alone until it's bedtime and I'll give you a kiss goodnight. It's like, no, I need to make sure that I'm present and around you, I'm spending time and, you know.
Engaged, involved,
yes.
And all that, yeah.
Changing diapers and all of that stuff.
That's a huge different dynamic from when we grew up or when our own parents grew up versus now. That adds a lot of different pressure to us than what our own grandparents had after being involved in their children's lives. So
I don't know that I like the word pressure though. I mean, I understand probably where you're coming from with it, but
there's more asked of us in that respect.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, you know, I guess I try and view it of making sure that the child rearing is a little bit more equitable with your wife.
Right.
Because it was obviously all about mom way back when, and even modernly, it's still much more about the time that she spends with the kids. You know, she has a lot more weight in terms of the child rearing and all that. Just the nature of our work lives and, you know, time and all that stuff. But yeah, it's to me, it's trying to make it as equitable as possible, partly so that it's not all on her to, you know, help raise these two boys. Like, no, I want to be a very functioning dad. You know?
And builds a stronger relationship between you and your children as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you're talking about spending time with Jasper and spending time with Axel. What are some of the things that you do in order to spend that time with them? What ways do you use in order to connect with your 5-year-old versus how you connect with the 2-year-old?
To me, it's it's getting into their world more so than forcing them into mine. When they want to come into mine, great. So an example of that would be I play music on Sundays for church, and there's a regular rehearsal, excuse me, that I have on Thursdays. And so there have been times where Jasper's wanted to come with me just because he loves the music, he wants to hang out. And I know that he's old enough that he can hang out, sit there, and watch, pay attention, do whatever it is he wants to do, and he'll be fine. But that's, if he's wanting to be in my world there, it's like, okay, well, we can spend that time a little bit. Axel can't quite do that because he can't sit still well enough.
Right.
But in terms of like make sure I'm spending time with them, it's definitely about engaging what it is that they're doing or wanting to do. So like Jasper, I mentioned before, he'll want to play games with me. So Connect 4 or Sorry, those are big games that we'll play.
Yeah.
Or before bed, the rock, paper, scissors, shoot. With both boys, I try and read to them, in particular before bed. With Axel, he loves to wrestle. Jasper will wrestle sometimes as well, but like he wants to do that, or he loves going outside. So, if he's wanting to go outside, just going out and being with him and letting him kind of run his show, and then he'll interact with me from time to time, but it's just kind of being available and being a part of what it is he's interested in doing, and letting him kind of explore that and just like showing interest. Like, okay, if that's what you want to do, let's go do it.
Yeah.
So no magic trick there.
Well, you would be surprised. I'm sure there's quite a few people out there who'd like, how do I connect with my kid when there's such a huge age disparity? I don't know what to do with a 5-year-old. I don't know what I have to do with with a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Like you said,
just walk behind them if you can keep up.
Right. Okay, I can't play tag, but how about we try this other thing?
Right.
Yeah. So that's some really, really great insight, I think. I'm curious to know, what did you do in order to help Jasper with the idea that there was going to be another child coming along?
Daniel Tiger.
Daniel Tiger.
So, in particular, so he was 2 when Jocelyn got pregnant. I know some people say when we got pregnant, but it really...
Right.
Child was not in here. But Daniel Tiger was a big part of his kind of viewing experience. Mr. Rogers, love it.
Yeah.
And that, it was right at the same time that I think it's season 2 came out on Netflix, and Daniel Tiger's parents end up having a girl. And so they bring a baby in, and so it was kind of incorporating what he was experiencing through Daniel Tiger. And so it was funny, before we had the ultrasound to figure out the gender, it was, so, hey, would you like a baby brother or a baby sister? Baby sister. Baby sister. Like, he was dead set on wanting a baby sister because Daniel Tiger
had a baby
little
sister.
baby sister.
Right.
And my wife is probably still mad at me if she thinks about it again. When we were at the ultrasound appointment, we brought Jasper to it, and she really wanted to get his reaction when we told him what the gender was. And I ended up telling him before we started filming. She's like, you missed it! But so like we found out it was little state of Florida hanging out, and it was like, all right, well, we know what that is. And so I told him, like, you're gonna have a baby brother. He looks at me and goes, no, baby sister. I want baby sister. It's like, that was an awesome reaction. He's totally happy having a brother now, but at the time it was just Daniel Tiger. But just letting him know that it was going to be a little bit different, but when you're 2, you can't get too philosophical and we still love you too. Like, well, it's going to be much more about how much time you spend with him, how okay he's going to be with it. If he starts feeling neglected, then you're going to have issues. But, fortunately, we were both pretty good at making sure we still had Jasper time and incorporating him with Axel and all that.
Very good. Very good.
That was probably the most obvious transition part, though, when he became a daddy's boy. He already was sort of leaning that way, but then it's like, she has to feed brother all the time, and so
So that's a perfect opportunity for you to spend time with him.
Yeah, for me to swoop in.
Right.
I'm going to take one of these. This one will be mine.
Yeah. No, that's really awesome. When our youngest was born, Maximilia,
Right.
the other girls were 17 and 12 and 10, somewhere thereabouts. And so leading up to the birth, I would take them out on alternating Tuesdays or Wednesdays or whatever, and we'd have daddy-daughter night.
Oh, okay.
In order to let them know that, hey, you're still special to me. You haven't been forgotten.
Right.
And we're just going to go out and we're going to go get donuts at Krispy Kreme. We're going to go mini golfing or whatever the case may be. And we continued that for as long as we could afterwards.
Right.
In order to maintain, like, yeah, there's this other person in the house and she takes up a lot of energy, but it has no bearing on how we feel about you either. So I found that really helpful. I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one who thought of it.
Yeah.
It works out really, really well.
Yeah. Did Max sleep well at night?
You know what? We worked it out that first I would say that I had extra time off from work. I was able to take FMLA, and my wife had saved up enough money because she's the budgeter of our household.
Yeah.
That I was able to end up with like a good 8 weeks of time off after Max is born.
Wow.
And of that time, there was a point where my oldest children went to go visit their mom for the summer. So it was just her and I and Max for a good portion of that 8 weeks.
Nice.
And so when I took that time off, my wife had said, you at some point are going to have to work. So how about this? I will do all of the feedings and diaper changes and all of that at night. And then when you wake up in the morning, you take the baby unless she needs to be fed. Fine, done deal. Let's shake on that right now.
Yeah.
And I slept really, really deep as it was anyway. So I would get a good 6-7 hours of sleep. I would wake up and it would be maybe 6:30 in the morning. And I'd take the baby downstairs after she was done eating. And she and I would play Skyrim and just play video games until it was time to change a diaper or another feeding at 9, 10 o'clock.
Right.
Take the baby back up there, do the thing. I would make my wife a really great breakfast. I'd make egg tacos. I would make pancakes, whatever she wanted, just something really nice and filling but still kind of healthy. Lots of fresh fruit. I would go take a nap, and then as soon as I got up from my nap, I would go ahead and make lunch. Again, just trying to make sure that it was really nice and healthy food, some really nice gusto salad type stuff. And then when it came around time for dinner, that was the meal where we just mailed it in. We were like, no, we're going to get takeout. We're going to get pizza, whatever the case may be. We're going to cut it easy. And one of the other things that I mentioned, I say this with a certain amount of guilt as a Portlander, or Portland metro area person.
We got the long hair. You're totally hipster now. You belong.
Oh man, hitting me hard. You're true. You're right. But we lived off of paper plates and plastic forks and spoons and all of that because it was like the less dishes that I have to do, the better. And it saved our sanity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dishes are
right. It's just one more chore that you can't get to.
It's not as bad as laundry, but laundry you can't avoid unless you just whatever. I'm going to wear this for a week.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah.
So we got through that period pretty well.
Gotcha.
For other parents and other dads, they don't have that luxury. They oftentimes have to go back to work the next day or within a week or two. Right. How much time did you have off?
With both kiddos, I basically took 2 weeks. With Jasper, there was a holiday in there. Whatever one we just passed, Memorial Day. So I had a little bit longer, but both boys were born on a Thursday, and so basically 2 weeks and 2 days for both of them. Jasper's 2 weeks and 3 days, whatever. But with both kids, I ended up going to California shortly after they were born with Jasper. It was after 6 weeks. And then, so his 7th week of life, I was in California that entire week. And then with Axel, I think it was only after his third week and then it was just like an extended weekend that I had to go down to California. But it was kind of a joke in my head that with both boys, okay, well, we had a kid, had another boy, I had to go down to California again. So.
Well, all the fun stuff, all the important stuff happens in that 7th week too. So.
Yeah. Well, and with Jasper being my first baby, and I was like, I will be gone for 1/7 of his entire life. Like the fraction still seemed big enough that I could
it's a big deal.
And so it was like you get a little FaceTime from time,
It's great.
Little photo sent.
Do you have any trips to California coming up anytime soon?
No.
Okay.
My last trip that we did to California was actually a year ago. I think it was in February. Jocelyn took the boys with her mom, aunt, and a couple other folks for Disneyland. It was supposed to be just a few days, and then they extended it, and then randomly called me up on a Thursday. Everything in my life happens on Thursdays, I guess. And like, hey, you want to come to Disneyland? There's a plane you could catch this evening. And it was scheduled to like sleet, snow in Portland that night. I was like, well, most likely I'm not going to be able to come into work tomorrow anyway. So let me just make sure it's okay with my boss. And I told my boss, and he just kind of rolled his eyes and like, I'm not going to tell you no to that. So I got on the plane, went down, and she didn't tell my kids, in particular Jasper, who was old enough to know.
Right.
Didn't tell him that I was coming, and so landed in LAX, caught a taxi cab all the way from LAX to Anaheim, which is a $100 taxi ride.
Ouch.
And anyone wanted to know that. Kind of surprised me how expensive it was. And my first card I ran didn't work because I've had fraud on my account before. So it's like, oh, you're in LA or Anaheim charging $100. Like, no, it must be fake. Fortunately, I had another credit card. Well, anyway, but snuck into the hotel room, slept that night, woke up, and they like, hey, remember we told you, Jasper, you're gonna have a surprise? And he's, yeah. And then I walk in, and it's probably a little anticlimactic for him because he likes, toys as his surprise.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, it's Daddy. Yay. Anyway, that was, stayed the whole day, and then came back on Saturday.
Awesome.
Anyway, that was our last California trip.
Fair enough.
None scheduled right now.
Okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break here,
Okay.
and then we'll come back and we'll go over some other questions.
Sounds good.
Welcome back, everybody. You missed out an incredible conversation here. So we thought we'd bring you back in order to enjoy it.
Have a less incredible conversation.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Our beers have escalated.
Right.
They've improved their game.
Look at that. While we're at it, one of the things I didn't cover is what we're drinking. And so you're drinking the Paulaner Oktoberfest.
Thank you.
I've got the Hofbrau Original Helles, which is fantastic. So before we go any further, to Dad's.
To Dad's. Cheers.
Cheers. So we talked quite a bit about Jasper.
Yep.
Talked a little bit about Axel. And just to be plain out, straight out and honest, what I like to do is I like to talk about your experiences with your dad and how that relates to how you are a dad.
Right.
And the things that your dad did and that you want to pass on from that generation onto your own children. What are the things that are the same? What are the things that are different? So I'm just going to open up the floor and let you talk
Right.
about that for a bit.
Yeah.
And drink my beer.
Yeah. No. Enjoy it. So my parents' relationship, they were together for, excuse me, the first 7 or 8 years of their marriage, which was when I was born. And I have an older brother from my dad's first marriage. But there were brief periods where he lived with us, but by and large, like I grew up as the oldest child. But my parents married in 1980. I was born in 81. And so they were together, living together for about the first 7 or 8 years of their marriage. Then they were split for about the next 7 or 8. And then my freshman year of high school, I was actually in the middle of writing a paper for one of my classes, and I was writing about when my mom kicked my dad out of the house. Like it was just, I can't remember the exact assignment, but I thought, oh, this would be a really good topic. It was before Christmas time, and all of a sudden, at the time we were living in Camas, and my room was in the basement, and there was a separate entrance through the backyard into the basement. And so my dad started randomly knocking on my basement door, and he would come in and hang out and sleep in my room. I remember telling my mom about this years later, and she's like, I never knew that.
Wow.
Yeah. But he would hang out. I had a TV and all that stuff, and they eventually, I knew that they had worked things out, because the reason he was hanging out was so that in the morning he could kind of walk around to the front door and engage my mom in conversation and try and make amends. And so they got back together, and I knew the moment because I came home from school and they were putting ornaments on the tree together.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, all right, well, it looks like Dad won't be coming into my room tonight. And so then they were together for the next 7, 8 years after that, and then they officially divorced after there. And then there was a 6-month period of time where I actually lived in this 3-story house by myself.
Wow.
So my mom was living with her boyfriend. My dad had moved into a condo, and the house was being ready to get put on the market for sale. And I was the only one living there. And it's like this big empty house, except for where I am in the basement. And it's actually the only period of my entire life that I've lived completely by myself.
Oh, wow.
But long story to get to the point, I guess, is that my dad wasn't really around a lot during the formative years. It's interesting. I'm sort of tangenting, but I saw a comic very recently that I liked a lot, and it related to this topic, and I actually think about it a little bit with my dad and my relationship, especially as it's progressed as we've gotten older. But the first it's like 3 composites of the exact same image, and it gets less and less vivid, less and less clear. It's like more of an outline by the time you get to the end of it. And it's this dad with his 2 kids. And the first one, it says, they may not remember what you say. Second one, they may not even remember where you were. And the third one, but they'll remember you were there. And it resonated a lot with me. And I think about that with my dad, in particular after college, when he was around a lot more. Anytime that I would play a gig, go whatever with my band, whatever band I was in at the time, he would always show up. And he was always, I was like, okay, I know he's going to be there. And he'd get his ticket, whatever, he'd show up. Oh, I'm good, And it's, we don't have a relationship that's real touchy-feely or even all that communicative in terms of like feelings, to hear either of us say I love you to one another would seem strange in a way. But I mean, I have no doubt that it does. And I know he has no doubt that I do. But I remember as a kid, those moments where he was there, when he'd show up, a random baseball game or whatever. And so I kind of, when I saw that comic, was like, that kind of is my relationship with my dad.
Yeah.
Is he shows me that he cares because he shows up. And it's not like, especially now that I'm an adult, I live out here and he lives, 45 or so minutes away. So I'm not around him all that often, every now and again. But it's like, if I need him, he'll be there. And so that's a big part of my relationship with my dad. There's a lot about his personality that I have, and there are things that he's done, especially as an older person, that I think were remarkable. He completely changed careers. So when he moved back in when I was in high school, he, for years and years and years, was a long-haul truck driver, which is kind of why there was so much distance. But even then, like when he would come into town, the guy that he worked for lived like 5 blocks away, and it wouldn't be all that uncommon that I'd be walking to the store, because there was a little corner store, and I'd kind of look over and I'd see my dad hanging out on the couch at that house, like, oh, Dad's back in town, whatever. And if he would come.
So as I was saying, I have an 11-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and when I first moved out here, I had a really, really bad caffeine habit, which is a better thing to say than to say that you have a Coke habit, because that's a different thing.
Yeah. Very.
But my drug of choice was Coca-Cola Classic.
Okay.
I don't know why we continue to use the Classic, because there isn't new Coke around, but here we are.
Okay.
So I would drink that like cases and cases at a time. I even had a dedicated mini fridge to keeping the cans cold. All right? So there would be times where I would be in a different room away from the mini fridge, and I would call the kids and I would ask, who wants to get me a brand new Coke? And the 3 and the 5-year-old would fight over each other, and one of them, likely the 5-year-old, would be faster, get there and get a Coke and bring it back to me, and the 3-year-old would be crying. And so I solved this problem by saying, kids, you both can get me a Coke. It's fine.
So like my dad, he didn't really become an articulate human being until he went back to school, which was when I was in high school. So all of my younger years, most of his communication with us was and so there would be quite a few times he'd just look over, it's like, you want another beer, Dad? All right, I'll go grab one for you. Here's your Rainier.
Well, we're not drinking Rainier today.
No. Vitamin R.
What you had said something earlier, though,
Yeah.
which reminded me of something that my own dad had said. It just kind of echoed in my head.
Yeah.
Which is that it's a dad's responsibility. It's our job to be there, even though we may not be needed. Mm-hmm. And the way that had come up is that I was talking about having to go to middle school
A recital
orchestra recital type stuff, right?
Right. Great use of everyone's time.
I loved seeing my kids perform and participate. Mm-hmm. That was great. And they played beautifully. Mm-hmm. Wasn't there for the other kids.
Yeah,
I was there for mine.
Yeah.
And sitting in a really warm gym with a bunch of other parents on some really stiff bleacher seats was really, really difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that I went. If only to see how much joy that they were getting out of it. Right? Still is kind of tough. And so I'm sharing this with my dad, and my dad's like, you're there to be there.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to hear that is a universal acceptance amongst dads. Of no, this is, you're there to support them through their things. Mm-hmm. And for him to come to your shows, hither and yon, and plop down good money in order to see you perform. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun. My mom was obviously much more involved, even like on in terms of music for me early on, but her schedule and life haven't allowed her to come to nearly as many things as Dad can, and I know he loves it and enjoys it, and he's a musician still at heart, so
nice.
but yeah, those are fun things, and it's always nice to see him. And he hasn't come to a show in a little while, but I don't advertise them in the way that I used to, so they're more like gun for hire shows that I do now, more than like my own band.
Right.
I enjoy them a lot. Don't get me wrong, but it's just a different thing, But yeah, and even though I was kind of thinking about this on my way in to this evening, like even though sort of my formative years or young years, he wasn't around a ton. When he was, I was always very respectful. I never had any resentment toward him, and I never felt like I missed something because, we didn't have the cleavers or whatever that, mom and dad always together. It's just when he was there, it's like, okay, you're your dad, so you weren't here yesterday, but today you're here, so I'm going to ask you if it's okay if I go down to the park, whatever. Right. Like my brother had more resentment issues, and I think they've worked that out, but I was never that one. And even beyond my dad, I had some really good male figures in my life, that I could lean on from time to time. My mom's best friend, her husband was reasonably involved in my life, and so it's like had him, and I think probably in particular my grandpa Al, which is my dad's mom's husband. They got married, my grandma and grandpa Al, I think they got married in '83, if I remember right. My grandma's been married a few times, but her first husband and with my grandpa Al, she was married for 25 plus years. She got married very young to my dad's dad, and then he died of cancer. And then she has two relationships she's never spoken to me about. I tried to ask her once about it, and she's like, we don't speak about that.
Okay.
And we left it alone. and then she's married to my grandpa Al. And he was a great guy. Loved my grandpa Al. learned a lot from him in terms of like being a dad, and, just being a man, you know. Anyway.
So what are the traditions that you've had, or the traits that you learned from your own dad that you're looking to pass on, or maybe stuff that you don't want to pass on?
Right. So my dad and I have very similar senses of humor, and it's fun to see that in my kids. But even, I think it was just this last Christmas, or maybe even more recently than that, my brother had made a comment about my dad and I could get each other going with laughter to where he would turn bright red from not being able to breathe. And it was never anything that was like super, like a funny joke that, it just slayed everyone else. It was something funny enough that we would end up laughing, and then we'd catch eyes, and his laughter would make me laugh more, which would then snowball him to laughing. And those moments, the fact that those moments stood out to my brother, who, you know, could observe, but it was definitely a between my dad and me thing. I'm looking forward to having those kinds of moments with my kids. Just kind of getting back to what I had mentioned earlier, where I don't remember what was said. I can vaguely tell you where we were, but it's more like just being around each other and sharing that experience, and knowing those moments existed. It's great to be able to look back on that, and so I'm hoping and look forward to having those moments with my own kids. And, you know, to lesser degrees than that we have, and, you know, we'll get jokes going back and forth. You know. As humorous as you can be with a 5-year-old, a lot of it is poop or fart jokes, but, you know, that happens.
No, it's true. I mean, you've got a 5-year-old, you use the word butt, and they're all over it.
Yeah.
They love it.
Yeah. So, like, definitely the humor and just being willing to share that. Like, it's not all strict and discipline at all times. It's like, no, we can have some fun too. And then, like, in terms of things like to not share or not pass down would be like just that absence of, you know, when he wasn't around. You know, I look at that and it's like, okay, well, I don't want to do anything that will screw up what I've got going on here in terms of, you know, got my wife, got me, got these 2 kids. We're all in the same house right now. If I can keep that, I'm going to do everything I can to keep that, because part of it is selfish, that I don't want to miss out. Like, I had the idea of being an every other weekend kind of dad, like, no. But you know, family traditions is like the only one that really comes to mind is we do Christmas on Christmas Eve. We always have, you know, that's when we open our presents and all that stuff. But you know, which works out well with my wife's family, because we'll end up getting together on like Christmas Day. So there's never any awkwardness of like who's going to be around for Christmas Day activities or Christmas Eve activities. Like, no, we got that dialed in.
That's good.
We're good.
That's good.
But yeah, I mean, nothing else really stands out to mind. Music has always been a big part of my family. My dad played harmonica. He doesn't anymore, but he used to play it a lot, and you know, I'd get to hear him play it from time to time. My mom used to play classical piano, and so there was always some kind of music in the house, and so that's been a staple for me as well. And you know, my kids, they see my guitars and my basses and stuff, and there's piano, and sometimes they'll, you know, bang away on the piano. And I gave Jasper a piano lesson one night. He doesn't remember like how to play it, but it was like the Star Wars theme.
Right.
Dun 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 dun. He was able to do it. It's like, oh yeah. So, like passing those little things along, and both of my boys love music in one way or another, and so getting to incorporate them in that will be something that's really cool. And that's, ultimately that's from both of my parents as well. So
Sure.
Jocelyn's folks, neither of them are musical. She sings, but I don't know where she necessarily got that from in her family. So, those little things probably.
Cool. That's from what you're sharing of your dad with the harmonica and the long haul tucking. I feel like I'm drawing a caricature in my mind of what he's like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's starting to come together a bit.
It would probably take too long to find a photo. I spoke to middle schoolers and high schoolers a little more than 2 months ago. And it was to, talk about your life story. Just share your life story in 20 minutes. How long have we been interviewing and we haven't gotten, it was like, okay. But I decided that I was going to share just a real brief, at least photos of both my parents. And my dad has one that he'll post every now and again on Facebook for his Throwback Thursday because he loves that. And I think he was somewhere in the Midwest, I think Iowa, something like that. But he has this Harley Davidson t-shirt on, and it's when his beard was like epically long, like down to his belly button. Wow. And he had really long, big hair, and he's got, the aviator sunglasses on. I mean, he looks like someone you would be terrified to see in a back alley. And it's like, yeah, that's my dad. And that definitely fit who he was at the time.
Sure.
Now he actually just switched jobs. He's been with his new company for about the last month, but before then he was with Nike for the last 16 or 17 years. He wasn't a Nike employee. He was like a contractor with most recently Axios, and he actually started there with a temp company, but it's like he's a computer nerd. And that's when he went back to school. It was for like computer networking. I don't know. He would share random things with me, and it was just kind of like, all right, Dad, whatever, cool, But he can talk to you about computers and all that techie stuff for longer than I could tolerate. But so is the caricature of who he's become has definitely shifted from that, heavy beer drinking, long haul trucker, harmonica blues player guy to much more of, older, nerdy
sedentary
IT
sort
guy.
of, yeah.
Yes, very, very sedentary. He'd probably tell you too sedentary. But yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a question that I fully admit right off the bat is an unfair question.
Perfect.
So answer it as best you can, or don't. Just don't punch me in the face, please.
Okay.
Or if you do, make it worth it.
It probably won't hurt.
Are you a better father than your dad?
Yes. And I mean, I should qualify, than he was at my age.
Okay.
Because I'm present, and I don't have the same sort of demons that I think he was probably dealing with at the time. Alcoholism was part of his life for a good while. In fact, when he came back to live with us in high school, he quit drinking altogether. And it's only been recently that he's decided, to start drinking again. And he's a 66, almost 67-year-old man now, and he's, completely different in terms of his personality. So it's, whatever, you're fine. I've had a beer with him, and I don't think anything of it. But,
right.
I think when he was my age, he had other things going on, and he wasn't present. He was, and it's not a knock on him at all. It's just I tried to learn from those lessons, and I'm very engaged with my kids. I help out around the house and all that stuff. Try and be as much of an equal parent with my wife as we can. And that's just very different. I mean, my dad, when I was younger, when he was home, he was much more in that traditional mold of he sat down and he was watching TV and it was going to be his shows. If you wanted to watch his shows, great. If you didn't, have fun. Go do something else.
Right.
So
back before we had 5 TVs in every household.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, there are things that I'm hoping that when I am a grandpa, there are aspects of how he interacts with his grandkids that are extremely admirable. And there are things that I hope to improve upon. Not that he's screwing up by any means.
Right.
But I hope to be if for whatever reason I happen to be a single grandpa, more than likely that would be because Jocelyn passes away. Not saying that's going to happen, but just hypothetically.
There aren't any plans.
Hypothetical world.
Right.
That I would be able to take the kiddos, even when they're still in diapers, and hang out with them and change diapers and stuff. Neither grandparent, definitely not Jim, my wife's dad, and my dad. Diapers are not their thing.
Right.
And so hanging out by themselves with Axel, that's not really in the cards. But my dad he actually took Jasper to the zoo just a few weeks ago, and it's great, little things like that. And again, kind of what he's done with me as an adult of just being present and available, and he's coming into my world, so to speak, like with my gigs, and taking Jasper to the zoo is sort of, he knows that's something Jasper would enjoy. It's not, hey, as long as you come and watch the Seahawks football game with me. I have a feeling Jasper wouldn't care too much about that on the TV unless you're handing him, your phone and he can watch something else.
Right.
But like those elements of my dad of just being present and willing to invest in your world, I hope to incorporate those as best I can, both going forward with my kids and when I become a grandparent as well. But yeah, long answer to your trick, unfair question.
We like long answers here. That's totally fine.
Right.
That's totally fine. Okay. So give me a little bit of information about your experience as a dad. How did you learn to become a dad?
Right.
And what resources did you have?
Yeah. Two very separate questions there. So in terms of resources, I think I already mentioned, like my grandpa Al. And in fact, growing up, maybe I did. I probably did. I'm wondering if I knew that he wasn't my dad's dad, but no, I always knew that. But my grandpa Al, he's one of those guys that I go, damn, I wish you could have met him. Like my wife and I were together-ish, like we were dating, courting, whatever. When he was really ill, he had dementia, Alzheimer's, all that stuff. He ended up being in a home because it got to where my grandma couldn't take care of him. And he ended up passing away before she ever got the chance to meet him. And very much so, my grandpa Al is someone who, like, I looked up to so much for so many things. And I'm like, damn, I wish you could have met him. And even my kids, like, I kind of feel like there's so much of him that is me, even though there isn't necessarily, the biological connection. But growing up, every spring break, my brother and I would go out to Dallas, Oregon, and spend the week with my grandma and grandpa. And then during the summer, we would each separately spend at least a week out there, hanging out. So I got to be around my grandpa Al a lot. And he was a great character, very much a perfectionist, although he never wanted to call himself a perfectionist. But he showed me like how to work in the wood shop. Not that I'm very handy, especially anymore, but I always enjoyed that. And if I had probably a lot more free time, so maybe sometime after the kids leave the nest, so to speak, and maybe I have a little bit more to invest in those kinds of tools. Like I enjoyed working with wood because it was something my grandpa enjoyed. But he used to have an old 22, and they lived in a rural part of Dallas where there's just woods behind him. So he would actually let us shoot the 22, which is probably the only time I've ever shot a gun. I was in elementary school, and it was his old 22 rifle. He'd put a bucket way down and we'd just try and shoot at the bucket and stuff. But he was Air Force in World War II. He was in Korea. In fact, the house in Dallas, when he and my grandma first moved to Dallas, they were in like a little, I think it was a townhouse, and they bought property, and he built the entire house, like himself. It's like, what the hell?
Wow.
But like just getting to be around him. There was my entire life, there was only one time he ever raised his voice at me, and then 20 minutes later he was apologizing for raising his voice at me because he thought I was giving him a smart-ass answer to something, which is very likely true. But he got frustrated with me at that moment, and so he apologized for it. He always spoke in the third person. It's like, your granddad's going to go to the grocery store. Would you like to go with your granddad to the grocery store? But with him, like he would take me fishing. Like I got to experience a lot of things with him that, in a way, it was him bringing me into his world, but in a way that was very digestible for a small kid, and things that he knew I thought would be fun. I play golf, and the reason I play golf is because he had golf clubs at his house, and I got bored one day, and so I found his golf clubs and a golf ball and started whacking it around the yard. And so like that became a part of our relationship where he didn't really play much until I showed an interest, and he and my grandma made sure I had lessons when I was over there. And anyway, just being around him, I learned a lot about love, compassion, patience, a lot of patience, and then just clothes, and just being available and interested in other people. And he had his specific routines. He was a very disciplined man, and a lot of those aspects and traits, like I've tried to mirror. So in terms of like a man, if you will, and a father figure, he was huge. And it wasn't that I spent a ton of time. He didn't live down the road, it was. But when I was around him, it was very impactful.
Very concentrated experiences.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that gives us some history of where you drew experience from, by certainly from your own father and from your grandpa Al, in emulating what you've witnessed, what it means to be a dad.
Right.
What about other experiences that you might have had where you learn how to be a dad?
Right.
I asked that knowingly.
Yeah. So in 2012, I started my job at Pico, which is a company that I worked with before starting at ADP. I started there in April, and then in June I started law school and online law program, and we were it keeps glitching, whatever. Anyway, we were living in an apartment at the time. The lease was about to run up, so a few months later started looking for a rental house. Found a rental house in Vancouver, just off of Mill Plain and a little bit west of 164th. And we loved this rental house because we had our room, we had a bedroom that I could use as an office for school, and we had another room that we were like, all right, well, when we decide that we're going to have a kid, because we were already, angling that way, if you will, like, this will be great, this will be our nursery.
Yeah.
And so we started that rental house. I was doing school, all that stuff, going well. And then Jocelyn got pregnant. Yay! And it was, while she was pregnant, things with my brother, his wife, and the kids started to go awry. And so we started having discussions, my wife and I, about, okay, if things go super south, are we willing to kind of take on my brother's 3 kids? He has Zachary, who biologically isn't his, but raised since he was very, very, very small. And Zachary didn't know at the time that he wasn't David's biological child. And then he had Staley and Riley. So at the time they were 9, 7, and 4. 9, 6, and 4. And so, we had talked about it, and DSHS was involved at the time. So they had conversations with us as well, like, hey, we just like to set things up just in case, whatever. And so, we were like, yeah, absolutely. We don't want the kids to be in some random environment. Well, come January of 2013, Jocelyn's 5 months pregnant, belly, full on showing and all that stuff. And my brother goes to jail for felony theft, and their mom is not doing well. Too many details. It's unnecessary.
Not doing well is good.
Not doing well.
We'll leave it at that.
And eventually the state decided we need to get the kids out of this situation in order to help, fix things. So the day that they called us the night before, like, hey, it's going to happen tomorrow. And so I ended up, I think I worked a half day. I came in to work in the morning, but the night before, like, we went to IKEA, got bunk beds, set up the bunk beds, and what we were planning on having is Jasper, what ended up being Jasper's nursery. And then my office moved into our bedroom, and that turned into Staley's room, where we're going to put her. So 2 boys, 1 girl. The state was okay with that. In true foster care situations, they all have to have separate rooms. But with family care, it was okay that so long as the genders were separated, at least the way that they presented it to us. So it was a Wednesday. It was actually the same day that, you can tell I'm an Oregon fan, it was the same day that Chip Kelly signed to be the coach of the Eagles, or that they announced it.
Okay.
So if you want to look up that date, go for it. But
transformative day in your life.
Very transformative, yes. So my grandma picked up Zachary and Staley from school that day, and let them know, hey, you're going to be, we're going to your aunt and uncle's. Didn't really know why, but they were excited because they spent enough time with us. I mean, for years, I took Zachary to school every single morning, and I was regularly involved in his life. And then when Staley was old enough, I'd take them both to school. So I was a very regular part of their life. And then Jocelyn, as our relationship, good stuff.
Yeah.
Our relationship developed. She just kind of got thrown into that mix as well, and
Right.
Developed the relationship
As well.
So they were just excited to be coming to our house. And then DSHS was the one who had to bring Riley over, and that was, he was fine. He was excited by the time he got to our place, but the story of the extraction, if you will, I could see why that would be a traumatizing thing for a 4-year-old at the time to have experienced, because his mom didn't take it very well, and she ended up spending the night in jail as a result. And that's, anyway, there's a whole other story there that's not really relevant, but all of a sudden, what's the math on that? 4 months earlier than we were expecting, we officially became
9, 4, and
6-year-old.
6-year-old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and for an undisclosed period of time, like no one knew how long it was going to last.
Right.
So we're like, all right, well, we'll figure it out, and we'll just see where things go. And by March, like nothing had really progressed. So we're looking at, our situation, trying to plan a little bit, and go, we don't have any place for that. For Jasper. Like, we don't have room. Like, we could put a pack and play in our room, but where the pack and play would go is where I'm doing my studying right now.
Right. Oh man.
And so we started looking at other rental houses. Like, okay, well, we're gonna need a 4-bedroom rental at a minimum. So we started looking around for that, and even back in 2013, the rent, even in Vancouver, for a 4-bedroom, we're just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We're like, we should consider buying. We don't have any savings, but sure, we could probably figure something out, right? And through a number of means, and we were able to consider, like, all right, let's find a spot to buy. And our real estate agent, she knew our story, and she was like, I will help you. Like, I will help you. Whatever it takes, I will help you. And so she showed us, I think it was 3 houses. And the one that we ended up buying, it was her cousin who owned the house. So she was actually the real estate agent on both sides, which is very rare. But because of that, she was like, look, I'm going to save you a little bit on this, because I can drop my side of the commission for like half of this. So, I'm only getting what I would if I was interacting with someone else.
Right.
And she's like, I've explained the situation to my cousin. Here's his absolute bottom line. This is, like, she still thought it was probably too high for us, but we were able to make it work. And so, which was the house obviously across the street from where you live.
They don't know that yet.
Sorry.
That's all right.
We used
Full
to be
disclosure.
neighbors.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how we met.
Yeah. And then you came to work for ADP.
Yeah. Years later, years after we moved.
Right.
But yeah, so we got that house, closed, and moved in 2 weeks before Jasper was due to be born. So
I remember that was.
So she was still technically pregnant when we moved in. She didn't do a whole lot of the moving, which is completely understandable.
Yeah.
And Jasper came on his due date, which puts him in the 15th percent of
Right.
kids that are born on their due date, something like that.
Max is in that same group.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I didn't know that. So yeah, it was. Got moved in 2 weeks before he was born. Suddenly, I mean, within 4 months, we went from 2 to 6.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So crazy.
And nothing prepares you to have 3 kids who are already well in their adolescence, and you haven't been the main parent. And in particular, at that point in time, they would have. So my brother, he got out of jail actually a lot earlier than anyone imagined would be possible. I think he was only in jail for a couple of months. And so he ended up getting, having scheduled visits with the kids in a supervised setting. Their mom eventually, it was kind of down the road, but she eventually ended up getting some supervised visits as well. But so they had both parents around sort of in limited capacity. And then, my mom and her husband would help out from time to time. My dad would come around and help out from time to time. But realistically, the only people in their entire lives telling them no were Jocelyn and me. And that made things extremely difficult as well, because they know we're not mom and dad. And so you have that dynamic. You have them kind of going through the trauma of, okay, we're not allowed to be around our parents all the time. We're living with auntie and uncle. We love auntie and uncle, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. It's nowhere near the same. Yeah.
And they have a social worker who's wasn't super involved, but would occasionally come around and having to ask them questions, bug them. And then I randomly learned about this organization called CASA that they're court appointed. And so the first time CASA came around was the day before a court appointment, and they were calling us, hey, we have to come out tonight and meet your kids and have an interview with them. I'm like, who are you? Because no one has told us anything. Wow. But I'm just thinking of the kids, like there's just all these random folks around. They're going through that trauma. And then when they are around mom and dad, they don't tell them no about anything. And so then when we're with them, it's like, okay, well, you need some discipline. And then also, we haven't raised you from the time you were an infant. So what motivates you or doesn't motivate you? Like, sure, we have a vague idea, but they're different. And there were some simple things that Riley, who was 4 when he moved in with us, he apparently never brushed his teeth, because when we started to try and brush his teeth, I remember this not many, but there were several times, especially the first week, where I would have to actually pin him down on the floor because he was fighting me so much. I'd have to pin him down on the floor and brush his teeth.
Wow.
And probably after 3 or 4 times of that, he caught on. And he started brushing his teeth, and he was fine. But it's just simple things like that. Getting them clean on a regular basis. They had a little bit of neglect just from this situation and kind of what their parents were going through at the time. And it was a strain. They were with us. They ultimately were with us for 14 months. They ended up getting removed from us because their mom accused me of some things. And when kids are wards of the state, in order to do an investigation, the state removes them from the home that they're in order to do the investigation. And so they were removed from us on a Monday, and then the next Tuesday, my wife and I were meeting with the investigator. And I told her, this is what I think is happening. This is why I think she's saying these things. And the investigator, I think she was pretty savvy, and I think she understood my story and was like, that makes a lot of sense. And so, she had some names of stuff that she could contact and whatever. But after a few weeks, I got a notice in the mail that's like, we've completed our investigation. It's unfounded claim. if anything comes up in the next 6 years, this could be considered, but for now, you're good. There's nothing more to expect there. But anyway, it was, there's still some wounds from that, and I've thought about it a little bit, and I really feel in particular for my wife, where she didn't get that chance to be a new mom with her new baby. We obviously, once we had Axel, we already had, you have Jasper in there as well, so you don't get that one-on-one with your brand new kid. It's like when we had Jasper, we had those 2 days in the hospital, but then once we got home, it's all right, well, yeah, you get to parent your baby, but you also get to parent these other 3 kids as well that, sorry, you're attached to because you're married to me, and they're, my brother's kids and all that,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but there was definitely a big learning curve in terms of parenting and things that, I'd look at and like, okay, well, I wouldn't do that again, but, it was an impossible situation. So you go, did you do the best you can? Yeah, we did the best we could.
So what is your relationship like with those kids now? Do you still see them?
Occasionally. So, as I mentioned, I used to be around almost every day, like when they were in school, because I was their ride. And then once they were removed from us, they were originally placed with their mom. And, the social work, everyone was like, oh yeah, you've been such a big part of their life. We definitely in some way want you to still be around. And then we weren't for like 2 years, maybe 3, something like that. And then the younger 2 are with their dad now. Zachary is in Yakima with his mom because David can't claim legal custody because we did the full adoption stuff. Anyway, we'll see them occasionally, but it's definitely, it's not like it was, and at some point I would love to be able to sit down and have, I think they'll need to be older, but to sit down and have conversations about, what the experience was like. I'm curious what it was like for them, but also help them understand our perspective and what we experienced, and things that, even if they look back on and go, oh, well, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Da, da, da. It's like, let me explain from what we were going through and what our situation was, because we tried to shield you as best as we could because you're little kids.
You want to do as much as you can.
Yeah. But, they're great overall. I think they ended up going through some additional trauma after that you can sort of see personality changes a little bit with some of them that, is kind of sad, but ultimately that aren't things that I can do anything about. And when I see them, I just try and love them and ask them how they're doing, and, inquire about their lives as much as I can, and, then let them play and do the things that they actually want to do. Hang out with Jasper.
Yeah. You were kind of thrown into the fire pretty quickly about what it means to be a responsible parent and a father figure, if not a father.
I even had the sex talk with Zachary, the oldest one. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He, which was light years. Like Jasper's 5. I'm thinking I've got probably 4 to 5 years before we have to really broach that.
Right.
But yeah, no, with Zachary.
Most people, they have a nice little progression, small baby steps all the way there.
Deep end, right away.
Jesus. Woo.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One of them is what about that experience helped prepare you for either now or for the future?
Right.
I forget the second question. So let's just go with that.
Yeah, no problem. So I learned things I think that didn't work with them, and some of my experience with them, and sort of trying, in particular on the disciplinary side, like having fun with kids, that's easy. But trying to actually like mold them and get them to do things that they don't understand why they need to do it at the time. Some of that you default to, okay, well, what did my parents do? And so for me, like, what did my mom do? To a degree. And that doesn't always come out in the way that maybe it did when I was a kid, because she had that time to build and develop those relationships. And so I think my fuse was probably a bit shorter back then, just because it was really high stress. And and so
wait. You're saying there's extra stress that comes with taking on 3 kids that aren't necessarily your own, and having a baby on the way, and buying a house and moving into that house?
Yeah. No big deal at all. While working full time and going to school.
And you had started a brand new job at that point, right? I mean, you were only a couple months in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever.
Nothing to it.
Yeah, whatever.
Typical Thursday for Andy Bell.
Yeah. So I try and approach my kids now with more patience as much as I can, because
right.
they're little shit sometimes, and they push my damn buttons, and they know it.
Right.
But it's different when you're raising them from the beginning. And so what triggers work for them. Like I know with Jasper, I can start counting like backward, and it freaks him out, and it gets him usually to do what I want him to do or need him to do. Because he hates that countdown, and I know that about him. Or if I need him to, like if we're at the park, we live pretty close to a park, and it's like, okay, well, it's time to go. How can I get him to go home without like crying and fussing or throwing a fit, whatever? It's like, hey buddy, race you home. Works like a charm. Like I know these triggers about my son.
Right.
And so I've tried to keep those in mind, which are things that I didn't necessarily have, little tools and tricks I didn't have with my brother's kids, even as much as I was around them. Like there's things you don't know that you're not as experienced with.
Right. Well, and to be fair, you've been there since day one.
Yeah.
For your own children.
Yeah.
Except for week 7.
Yes.
Which you missed.
Yes. Tragic week 7.
Tragic week 7. Whereas with your brother's kids, with your nieces and nephews,
it was more intermittent.
Right. Yeah. You don't know them as well as you would have your own children.
Yeah.
And so you're starting from square one.
Yeah.
With them at an advanced age where you don't know what works and what doesn't with them.
And the other part of that too is they didn't necessarily understand what living with auntie and uncle meant. Like our house is different than
different
their
rules,
house,
different setups.
So a whole lot of dynamics, but it's so those are kind of the lessons, I guess, is just like the patience and trying to figure out those other methods of getting to the same end that I've tried to incorporate as best as possible. And the fact that I already had the sex talk, like I have so the way that came about, because it's fun to me, is Zachary had already been showing interest in girls, because he turned 10 while he was living with us. And he would make little comments here and there, and it's like, I have a feeling that sooner than later. And the grade that he was going into was kind of like, I can't remember exactly when they start talking about like male, female anatomy and all that stuff. I remember I was talking to my boss at the time, and she was like, oh, I have this great, it's an animated book, but it has like all the parts, and it's very like raw, so to speak, but it's it's animated, like it's all cartoons.
Okay. Is this a pop-up book?
No, not a pop-up. It's just it's talking about men and women, and it has like a full naked drawing of like a cartoon guy and a cartoon woman. It has their anatomy and walks through like baby process, like that whole thing. And she's like, it's called Where Did I Come From? And she's like, it's a great book, I'll let you borrow it. So she brought it, and I flipped through it. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I'm like, okay, well, I'll hold on to it. And sure enough, Jocelyn picked the kids up from school. She walked in the door. She's like, so you're gonna have to have a conversation with Zach, because they started talking about stuff at school. And Zachary came and walked in the door. It's like, Uncle, we need to talk. So I sat him down in my office at the time, and I pulled out that book that I got from my boss, and we went through the whole thing. We talked about it, and he was just like, that's really weird. Like, yeah, buddy, it seems like that right now.
Yeah.
But I guess it worked, whatever. Like, we had that conversation, and it opened the line of communication. It's like, hey, if you ever have any questions, feel free to talk to me. I'm fully open. We can talk about whatever you want. And he never approached me with any other questions beyond that. But I've been down that road. I have that experience, so I have kind of an idea of how I might approach it with both boys as it comes up. We'll see.
So, based off of your experience of abruptly becoming a dad or a father figure, there's tons of dads out there in the similar situation where maybe they're dating somebody who has kids, they're about to become a stepfather, or unfortunately in a similar situation to where you're in, where they're taking care of children that they didn't expect to, but are kind of thrown into that role. I'm certainly hearing a reoccurring theme of patience. What other advice might you have for somebody who's in that position?
I would hit on another theme that's been reoccurring this evening, at least, is just being present and being genuinely interested in what they're interested in helps build those relationships, to me, with the kids. And that's something that I was trying to do with my nephews and niece as much as possible as well, and that's something that I do with my own kids. Is just there's even as adults, if you've ever read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think that's how it's called, Dale Carnegie. I love that book. And he said that the best way to become a great conversationalist is to ask someone about themselves. And because we all love to yammer on about ourselves, and hell, I'm doing it this evening. And I enjoy it.
And I thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. But kids are very much the same way, but they're not as articulate with their words. So it's much more about being interested in what it is they want to do, and just showing that and spending time with them. And I would imagine, like, if I was in a situation dating a woman who has maybe an older kid or multiple kids, who might be skeptical of who's this guy walking around here, that's how I would show them that I care about not only their mom, but also them, and understanding, like, me getting to know her is me being involved, at least to a degree, in your life, is figuring out what they're interested in and just attempting to engage them where they're at and what they want to do. And some of the coolest things, I mean, you can see it on, people share it on Facebook or YouTube, whatever. Like when couples in that situation, when they get married and the new spouse is now becoming, parent to this child who's, however old, and they will incorporate some level of vows to the kid as well, or bring them up on stage. It's like that kind of stuff always, like, I get a little choked up when I see it, and it's like, that's the right way to do it. Like, you understand, like, I was drawn to this family because of this person, but I need to recognize that you're a part of this as well, and I'm making a commitment to you beyond just this commitment here. Those little things.
Are you familiar with the sand ceremony? So that's what we did for our wedding. This is that the sand ceremony is that each person has a different color of sand. And so you have this giant container, and each person pours in their color of sand.
Right.
And once that's poured into that container, there's no way to separate out the individual grains of colored sand.
Right.
And so it's mixed together, much like your family will always be connected in some fashion, some way to that. And so we have that sitting in our kitchen on top of our cabinets, looking down over us whenever we want to look at it.
Yeah.
And we've got some really nice heart-shaped, essentially flower vases to go along with it, for each of the kids. But it was our way of incorporating them into the wedding and into the family.
Yeah.
Cool. And it was really kind of a nice moment. So that's something for all of you out there, in case you're looking for a way to do that.
Right.
But you're right. Finding a way to incorporate yourself not only into your spouse's life, but into the lives of those that they revere and care for is really important.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of that is based on age. If your soon-to-be spouse's children are 30 and above, maybe it's not as important. But when they're 4 and 5 and you're going to have a vital role in their upbringing, that's important. So, cool.
Yeah, a teenager might not give you the time of day even if you try, but at least you try.
Right. And it's important in those instances, as I've learned, to talk with each other as spouses in order to determine what your role is going to be. Are you going to be a rule enforcer? Are you there just for guidance and support? What is that, and what does that look like? Because you find out really, really fast how that's going to play out. You're not my mom. You're not my dad. And I'm sure you're familiar with hearing some of those same sort of things.
To a degree. They neither or none of the kids really threw that out at us. The fact that we were the only ones telling them no, it made it a bigger battle. And the fact that we weren't their parents, like, even though they didn't have to say it, but it's like, why are you telling me no? They don't.
Right. So,
what the hell's your problem?
So in full disclosure, of course, you and I were neighbors straight across the street from each other. We lived in a cul-de-sac, and my memories of those kids were nothing but positive. I remember there being some sort of infighting between them, but nothing beyond sibling rivalry. Right? Normal stuff. One of my favorite memories was a day where it inexplicably snowed in the Vancouver, Portland area. And so the entire cul-de-sac was covered in snow. And gosh darn it, I couldn't work that day. So I couldn't drive into work. I don't know if you were there or not. I think you might have been in the house if you were. But Jocelyn brought all the kids out.
I think I was at work.
And so we went outside too, and we had maybe 6 months to maybe a year old max, and Jasper was out there too.
Right.
And I don't know where it came from. There was a sled. We loaded the little kids into the sled and pulled them around the cul-de-sac. While the other kids were busy having fun and throwing snowballs and so forth. And I think the oldest one, Zachary, ended up throwing snowballs at the sled that was being pulled. And Jocelyn had to just very kindly, very, very kindly tell him, we don't want to do that.
Right.
But it was a really nice moment where the kids got a chance to interact and enjoy the snow and all of that. It was really nice.
Yeah, they were fun. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of stresses of having the 3 kids, but there were definitely good moments. Riley riding his tricycle in the cul-de-sac, always with his head down, just gunning it. And we'd have to constantly tell him, buddy, you can't do that. You gotta look
where you go.
Even in a cul-de-sac, like a car. You got the dumb guy who lives right over there. His friends whip through, blasting their hip hop music or whatever it was they were listening to.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. So they're fun, and I actually, from that day, it's one of my favorite pictures is from that day of Jocelyn holding Jasper, and he's bundled probably 3 or 4 layers of clothes. His first experience with snow, and it's just a picture of the 2 of them, and the whole white background in the cul-de-sac there.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good picture. I remember that day.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a break here.
Okay.
And we'll come back and we'll do my favorite part, which is the rapid fire questions. Okay, so we finished up with our private conversation. We're going to bring you back on in now and see where we go. As promised, we're going to go ahead and do the rapid fire questions.
Now, are these the ones in red or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So these are all stereotypical male questions.
Perfect.
There's a couple of trick questions that'll hit a little closer to home.
Okay.
But we'll just see how we go.
Scotch.
Oh, you're getting there. You're getting there. Last thing you grilled and when?
Grilled?
Yes.
So my wife does almost all of the cooking, although I'll make breakfast foods and eggs. I made eggs today. So even grilling, she loves that probably even more than I do.
Okay.
So it's been a while. Probably the last thing that I grilled was last summer, hamburgers for a company July picnic thing, lunch, with the hamburgers and hot dogs. And I was on the grill, just happened to be.
This actually is a separate question, so I want you to represent it as a separate question, not related to that specific grilling experience. Okay. Gas or charcoal?
I always use charcoal, I always use gas. Growing up, it was always charcoal briquettes. They're just so dang messy.
They are.
And gas is
reliable.
Yeah. I know that some purists the smoke and you should actually use hickory, whatever.
Right.
Whatever. Propane.
Okay.
Just go to Ace and fill it up. We're good.
So you already said Scotch.
Yes.
That is the next question, is beverage of choice.
Yeah. Scotch.
What do you drink?
So my adult beverage of choice is Scotch. My just generic beverage is a black coffee.
Okay, that works too.
I'm usually a triple tall Americano.
Okay.
Starbucks. But my favorites is actually Pete's right now. But Scotch, I like a peaty Scotch. So Ardbeg is
fantastic.
And Ardbeg 10 right now is kind of my that's the good go-to. It's not too expensive to actually buy the bottle and drink it and not feel like, oh my God, that was $25 that I just consumed. It's reasonably priced, and I like the way it tastes. But Scotch, my adult beverage of choice, far and away.
Okay, this is going farther than I expected for rapid-fire questions. But I happen to like Scotch too.
Yeah.
Lafroig, Lagavulin.
Yes. Lagavulin 16, absolutely.
Yeah.
A little pricey, but when it's around, yeah. Lafroig, the Lafroig 10, my wife thinks it smells like a Sharpie, but I love it. But I like the Ardbeg a little bit more than the Lafroig right now.
The Lafroig, I've got a friend who throws a kind of a white elephant brown liquor party.
Oh, nice.
And the first year I brought the Lafroig home, I shared it with my entire family who has come over for Christmas.
Even the girls?
Even the women, yes, and that's important to the story.
Okay.
None of the women liked it at all, and the men loved it. I remember my father-in-law turning to me and saying, "This is some good shit." And my dad, who had stopped drinking Lafroy, or had stopped drinking entirely because it was causing him too many bad headaches, even risked a sip or two. And he loved it, absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
So fast forward, my dad is dying. It's actually, I'm driving up to Seattle for the last time to see him. And he's on his deathbed, and I get to him, and in the rush of getting all of the kids together and all of that, we finally get there. And I say, "I love you," and we cry, and we share a moment or two, and I tell him, "I'm really sorry, Dad, I forgot the Scotch." And he looks me straight in the eye, and he goes, "You're killing me." So we're going to take you a little figurative at the moment. And he goes, "Was it the good stuff?" And we were talking about the Lafroig, the stuff that, I said, "Yeah, Dad, it was." He looks me straight in the eye again, and he goes, "Be still my heart." I was like, "Dad, not today."
I'll go to the liquor store down the road.
Oh, I was so tempted to point to one of the people, one of our family friends, and just tell him, "You find the closest liquor store, you get that bottle of Scotch, and you bring it back here as quickly as you can." I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wish I had. But on his memorial service, he had been cremated, and we put him in this container that's supposed to dissolve in water because we were going to set him out on the ocean.
Oh, okay.
He really enjoyed maritime and giant vessels with sails and the entire bit. So we rented like a schooner and set him out on the waves. But within the container that he was in, it was a dissolvable container that would break up in the water. I made sure to include a little bit of Lafroy, just to have him. And then after we got it out in the ocean, I realized I put it in a plastic cup. So I screwed up.
Sorry, fish.
Like, yeah. So much for that.
Oh, so is his passing sort of what spurred you to do this whole project?
That's complex.
Okay.
It's really complex. Ultimately, the answer is yeah.
Okay.
But it's what sparked it.
Because I've had that thought in the past, which is kind of why I was excited when you mentioned that you were doing this and were like, "Hey, would you be interested?" Is that there's so many times where you learn things about your relatives and people who are older that you never knew because it just never came up in conversation, and you don't have those kinds of random conversations where, "Hey, I'm going to talk to you for 3 hours about your experience, raising me or whatever."
Yeah.
And so there's so much that you sort of miss and about their lives that you never knew, and you find out, at a memorial service where their buddies from, however long ago, like, "Oh yeah, he used to do all this, da 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 da." My dad's pretty good at sharing random stories with me, but
Right.
but yeah, that thought's come to mind. So as you were mentioning that your dad passed away, it's like, I bet if I was in your shoes, that would probably have spurred something like this as well.
So part of it.
Okay.
Part of it was that within the last 30 minutes of my dad's life, he is not conscious. He's not talking or anything like that. And I am trying to remember a particular sonnet from Shakespeare, where there's a man who's oh, woe is me, the fact that he doesn't have the same things that a king would have. He doesn't have the riches, or he doesn't have the friends that this person has, and he doesn't have this over here. But what he does have is the riches of that relationship that he has with the person that he's writing this sonnet to. And that, given that, he would never, given the riches of that relationship, he wouldn't trade that with that of kings. I couldn't remember what it was, and I wanted to read it to him in his last moments to reflect how I felt about our relationship.
Right.
He was the person who would be able to tell me right then and there what that was.
Right.
And he couldn't tell me in that moment. So I had to turn to Facebook and ask that question, and I wasn't going to get the answer back as quickly as I wanted to.
Yeah.
As fast as our internet is these days, I couldn't remember a specific phrase that would help me look it up.
Right.
Because I was just in that space. And I was explaining this to my mom and my sister, who were also there at the time. I was like, the man who knows this is right there.
Right.
He knows this. And all of that information is going to be lost. And when I came to this project later on and realized that cumulatively, as fathers, we all have information that would be of use, of value to other dads who are trying to go through the same experiences that we've been through. And that there's value to that. And if we could just collect it in some place, a database, that would be of value to other people. And so that's where this kind of was born. There were other events after that that happened that helped push me along this path, but it's all related to that. Yeah. Now what's really funny is that someone else had interviewed me within the past month. And in that in that interview, she reminded me of the fact that she didn't know this, but it came up during this discussion, that my dad had taken audio cassette tapes of me when I was like 2, and my sister of similar age, and just recorded a random conversation with us. And I realized, and she said that was the origination of the database, wasn't it? It's like, holy crap, I didn't realize that. That's absolutely true.
That's funny.
And the very next time that I went up to go see my mom and to see my family, I went through my dad's den, and sure enough, I found those tapes.
Nice.
So now I have to figure out how to convert those cassette tapes to something that I can share with the world. So that's an awful lot for a rapid fire question, but I'm really glad that you asked. Favorite tool in your toolbox?
Have I mentioned that I'm not that handy?
Neither am I.
Yeah, so...
but there's still one that you really enjoy using, right?
I don't know that there are any that I necessarily enjoy using, because if I have to use a tool, it usually means there's something that's really screwed up.
Okay.
Or I am tinkering with something that doesn't impact my wife, so she's okay with me tinkering with it. So either a drill or a wrench of some kind.
Fair enough.
Usually
that
like
works.
My extent. I don't have like the band saws and all that.
Hammer or cocktail shaker still works. So if you want to change your answer.
Oh, okay. No, yeah.
Okay. You already answered who cooks, so we don't have to worry about that one.
No, yeah.
Stick or automatic?
Right. If I was to have more fun with driving, it would be a stick. But most of my life it's been automatics. But I do love the stick shifts that I've had. I've had 2 different stick shifts.
Good.
My wife can't drive them, so there's that. If I had like a fancy pants car that was like super slick, it'd definitely be a stick, if only because I would be the only one in my family who could drive it. And it would guarantee, like, all right, son, if you want to drive this, you're going to have to learn.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just daddy's car.
Man cave. Is that a thing or no?
If I were to have my druthers, it would be a study. I don't really care much for the nomenclature, if you will, of man cave. It just
Appreciate it.
but I love the imagery and the idea of the study. You know, the fancy pants chair, the scotch here, the books, and
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
a place that you're not going to just, you know, watch the game and do sports, whatever. Like, you're going there to enrich your life and, you know, improve, even if it's just
Intellectual study.
yes,
Yeah.
even if part of it is getting away from the family for a few moments, just to decompress for whatever reason. But study would be my go-to.
Okay. Now, I'm not talking about on a regular basis, though you can certainly include that if it is. Do you smoke?
No.
Cigar, pipe?
No, I mean, there have been occasions where with a friend I'll have a cigar.
It's a boys, or it's a girls?
Oh, well, even beyond that,
Okay.
you know. But man, it's been a long time. But
Special occasion sort of
yeah, just like usually if it's a cigar, we know it's going to happen, and so we're planning it. I've gone to, like, I think it's Kells, that they have the cigar bar down below. I went there once with two of my friends, and you know, that's fun. But it's extremely rare. Like, that's been probably a couple years since I did that.
thing. Have your children seen you cry?
I think I'll get choked up, but I'm not really a crier. I think my wife has only seen me cry once, and all the time that she's known me, and that was, a big moment, and it was like a full-on bawl cry.
Yeah.
But I haven't had any of those since either kid has been born. I'll get choked up from time to time, and I'll show them that and share that. But
Sure.
yeah, if I was a crier, they would. But it's just
Baseball game.
yes.
First base or third base side?
Doesn't matter to me. So the closer that I can get to the field, the better.
right.
In fact, next weekend for Father's Day weekend, my wife and I are going to go up to Seattle, and we're going to catch 2 Red Sox games.
Wow.
I'm a big Red Sox fan.
Okay.
I've been out to Fenway and that whole thing. And so the first game, Jocelyn bought the seats. She's like, if we're going to go, we're going to get good seats.
Yeah.
So one of them is on the third base dugout side, really close, which is where the Red Sox will be.
Right.
And then the next game is on the first base side. You know,
Nice.
Whatever. I've never caught a foul ball. I would love to. That would be. You've gotten two
Got
of
two.
them?
Got
Dang.
two.
I'm so jealous.
Caught is a really kind of technical term there. I picked it up off of the ground
Okay.
both times.
The closest that I've ever gotten is actually on our honeymoon. We went down and spent a week in Palm Springs. It was All-Star Game weekend. It was actually in Anaheim, and we were pretty close. But the first game after that was against the Mariners, so we went to that game in the outfield. Whatever, cool game. And then we went to San Francisco. We stayed there for a few days. And I just happened to look at my ESPN app, and I saw that the next day the Red Sox were going to be playing in Oakland. And so we were both like, we have to go. And so we went, and we got seats up in behind home plate, kind of up in their third level. By the end of the game, we were like right behind the Red Sox dugout.
Yeah.
'cause,
You got to move down a little bit. Yeah.
But while we were sitting there, I wasn't really paying attention. All of a sudden, this ball comes, and it's like 3 or 4 seats away from us, but some other folks had already grabbed it. And I'm like, had I been paying attention,
Man.
like, dang it, closest I've ever gotten.
Let's see here. What has been your most fulfilling moment as a dad? What is most fulfilling as a dad?
it's sort of a toss-up for me. Like moments like this morning with both kiddos jumping on me, like in the bed, just wrestling around.
Pop and pop is a thing.
Yeah, just them having fun jumping on me and thinking like, oh, I'm wrestling daddy, that's great. And then also the moments that I get to just kind of like, if they're sleepy enough that they'll snuggle with me and we'll just watch whatever program that they want to watch. Like that's awesome.
Yeah. What's your biggest challenge right now?
In my head, I'm thinking, how many more times can I tolerate watching The Greatest Showman? Every morning, Axel wakes up. He walks into our room, and he goes, show. Because he wants to watch The Greatest Showman.
Wow.
And he wants to watch it downstairs.
Wow.
You can't just, like, we have a TV in the bonus room, which is right across from our bedroom. Mm-hmm. He wants to go downstairs. And he wants to watch The Greatest Showman.
Okay.
And both boys love this movie. And it, good music.
It's a musical, right?
Yeah. And it's the music that they love.
You've already lost me.
Yeah, well, anyway, it's good music. The storyline overall, not great, but whatever.
Hugh Jackman?
Yeah.
Okay.
Both of them, though, both boys will like lip sync and like mime sort of different songs throughout the movie.
Right.
Axel really loves the first one and The Other Side. Jasper loves The Other Side, and we will go back and forth with, he will be Hugh Jackman's character, I'll be Zac Efron's character. And then it was like, let's rewind it, do it again, and this time you be, and we'll switch.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And he doesn't like know the words, but he'll kind of watch and he'll like mimic the things, and there's certain lines that, does the whole bit. It's funny.
Wow.
Axel will jump in on that as well, but
You need to get that on tape.
we've gotten
video
We've
or
gotten
something.
parts of it.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's the tolerance of when the kids get to control the TV, so to speak. Like every parent goes through that. Like, all right, I've watched Moana for the 100th time. Whew, all right.
Yeah.
But that's what you want to watch, and it's going to keep you calm. And right now, all I care about is keeping you calm. So
Right.
let's go ahead and hit that up.
Greatest fears.
Drugs.
Yeah.
Realistically, I've experiencing like what that did with in my family, and that was a paranoia that I always had growing up. Like why I never went in. I didn't smoke cigarettes, and get involved in any hard drug at all. Was that notion of addiction running me, like something else having control over me that takes me away from me.
Yeah.
And there's one thing that I could just completely remove from my kids, that would be it. And just don't have that random friend that's like, hey man, you need to try this little concoction or whatever. It's like,
You should move back into our neighborhood.
yeah. So anyway, that would be it.
No, that's a fantastic one.
Yeah.
Farts, funny or not?
Hilarious.
Okay.
I have two boys. Like they can't not be funny. Like
You're obligated at this point.
there are things like, and I'm assuming it's not just a boy thing, but like becoming a parent, I was not really fully prepared for, like, you will have the grossest moments of your entire life because you're a parent. Like, both boys have vomited on me in a way that is beyond repulsive. Like, Jasper one day got sick. He wasn't feeling well, and I had a class I had to attend on the web in my home office, and so my mom was on her way to show up, and I think she had just pulled into the driveway, and so I'm like, oh, okay, buddy, let me pick you up, and we'll go downstairs, and you can see Grandma. I pick him up, and I see that there's something on the couch that I needed to grab, so I lean over, grab. So he's got his mouth like right here, and he's full on vomits in my ear to the point that I have to like do that to get it out.
Shit.
And it went all the way down to my foot. Like, I am covered in vomit.
Right.
And it's like, you know what? When you sign on to be a parent, you sign up for vomit.
You do.
And for fart jokes and poop and like Axel, there's another time, like, Jocelyn has been puked on more than I have, but I've gotten the more disgusting ones. That's what I tell her is the trade-off. Axel, there's one day I'm sitting in my office chair and I'm holding him, and all of a sudden he vomits, and I'm like, I'm just going to keep you vomiting on me, because otherwise I'm going to be putting you to, you're just going to be puking on the floor, and I have to clean that up too.
Right.
I might as well just clean up a worse version of myself.
Right.
But like, I was wearing jeans and all that. My underwear was soaked.
God.
It was that much of a puddle. Yeah, and so there's that. And then Jasper, like, all he wants to joke around about is poop. He's already taught Axel poop head. Like, he can barely enunciate some of his consonants, but you can tell poopy head, poopy head. Like, wow. Oh my gosh. So yes, farts have to be funny.
Okay.
I'm not really rapid fire answering these questions.
That's all right. That's all right. We love it.
Idea.
I absolutely love it. Somewhat tangentially connected. Farts. You or the dog?
We don't have a dog, so it has to be me.
That's
That's
a problem.
Yeah, and both kids kind of take after me in terms of their stomachs. And Jocelyn reminds me of that regularly. So it's unfortunate for her.
Okay, we're going to take another very brief break.
Okay.
We'll come back. We'll answer a couple more questions, including your favorite dad joke.
Okay.
We're back. We're going to go ahead and just finish this off here. So, one of the entire purpose of this is to give other dads a resource to look at in order to help make their lives easier by learning from our mistakes and the things that we've learned. So what sort of advice do you have for other dads out there? What do you want other dads to know?
I mean, just continuing the theme from the evening is just be present, be available, and be involved.
That's fantastic.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very simple message, and it's something that's very straightforward, and yet it's something that's so easy to stray from and get wrong.
Well, and like often you kind of get in that mentality of like, well, I have to put in all these hours so that I can earn this money so I can help provide, and ultimately your kids, they don't care about that. When they look back, it's, you know, what were the moments that you were there, or what were the moments that you weren't there? And if you're not there, do I have any resentment for the fact that you weren't there? And so I've tried to live, in particular the jobs or where we've moved and all that I have. It's, okay, do I get time with my kids? Is there a good balance here? And
so how do you handle that work-life balance?
Well,
since that's the phrase of the of the age.
So when we were still living in Vancouver, the job where I was working moved from Southeast Portland to Clackamas off of 212, and Jasper was going to daycare in North Portland. So like in the afternoon, I would get off work, drive up 205 to Killingsworth, take that into North Portland, pick up Jasper, and then take the I-5 bridge home. So it would take me about an hour and a half to get home. And I'm like, I don't have an evening, and now I'm drained from this stupid ass drive that I just had to take. And yeah, I've got to interact with my little kid while we were driving, but you know, I'm trying not to fall asleep while in the middle of traffic, realistically.
Right.
So when we were able to move out to Clackamas, now I've got a 10-minute commute, and this was before Jocelyn started working at the church. So I could come home, have lunch with Jasper and Jocelyn before Axel was around. And so that was great. And then when I get off work, I'm gonna come home, I'd be there real quick, and I get to hang out for a brief period, a couple hours, and then I'd finish up school until I finished school back in 2016. And now with the two kids, when I was looking, or I wasn't actually looking, but when I'd considered what would it take for me to ever leave where I was, because that 10-minute commute was a great job. I could go, take Jasper to school, all kinds of stuff. I had a very strict list of criteria, and the opportunity at ADP arose, and that checks everything that I have. And now I get to work from home office, as much as I frankly want. I'm there 4 days out of the 5 in a week. And I still get to, before Jasper finished preschool, I could take him to school. They're around on Friday because Jocelyn doesn't work, so sometimes they'll be interacting with me kind of while I'm typing an email. It's like, oh, okay, hey. But as soon as I finish my day, it's like, all right, I closed the office door and now I'm here with the kids. There's no lag of commute, so
That's great.
yeah, that's important to me.
One of the other things that we like to do here on the Dadabase is give you an opportunity, because the internet is forever, as it is, and there's always the possibility that when you and I are long gone, that they may stumble across this, or maybe they already know about it. Here's an opportunity to talk to them directly to the camera, and share whatever sort of message you might have for both Jasper and Axel.
Yeah, and Axel. Yeah, I saw that you had asked this of Mike, and you probably did it on all of them. I'm hoping that I'm still around long enough, but obviously I love both of them. Love you guys. I have a mentality that would communicate to them. I mean, when Jasper finished preschool, it's like I told him, I'm proud of you, so I don't imagine that in the future there'll be something that I'll be like, man, I really wish I would say that to them, because I want to be in that habit and work on and continue that habit of telling them and expressing kind of what I think and feel toward them. So nothing revolutionary beyond, Daddy loves you, that kind of thing.
That's, what, when I went to go share my last moments with my dad, the only thing I wanted to tell him was I love you, because there were plenty of other things that I would think about along the way of, oh man, I'm really sorry that I did such and such, or that I never told you about this or that. But I could console myself with the fact that I had shared that message of, I love you, I care about you.
Well, and all the apologies, all the regret, it goes back to the only reason I would want to apologize or have those regrets is because this is how I feel about you.
Exactly. So that's a perfect message.
Cool.
Nicely done. So the very last thing we've got, what is your favorite dad joke?
And I when I saw this, I was like, oh God. Because I consider myself a reasonably funny person, but I don't tell jokes. I more tell stories. But both boys are really into knock-knock jokes, and I had a knock-knock joke with them today that I'm like, oh, well, I could use that because it's stupid and cheesy. Yeah. So keep in mind my kids' names Axel and Jasper, and so I did knock-knock.
Who's there?
Axel.
Axel who?
Axel-y, it's Jasper.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. I love it. Oh, man.
It's like, well, whatever. That
It
works.
works for your family?
Yep,
It's perfect.
Yep.
It's so perfect. All right. Well, on behalf of the Dadabase, thank you for sharing with us.
Very welcome.
Thanks for coming out. Thanks for having a beer with me. 2 beers.
Yes. Awesome.
It was a fantastic night.
Oh,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. For the Dadabase, we say thanks, and we hope to see you next time. Take care.
Seriously, I've had to lose some serious hairs to sleep because of this perilous pair of trees in the street. Oh, waving goodbye, bye, and everybody's talking about the times of the sign. And now, thank you for the haircut, Sanders, and thanks for the trim. Thank you for the haircut, Sanders, and thanks for the trim. Telephones are shaking my bones, and the motorcycle hounds are compiling our tones. Made of people, places, and things. It's people, places, and things.